Hello and welcome to Who's the Bossk? It's a Star Wars podcast from laughingplace.com. My name is Mike Celestino. I am your host. I am the lead Southern California reporter and editorial director for Star Wars content at Laughing Place. This is episode number 158 of Who's the Bossk, and we will be discussing the animated series, Young Jedi Adventures, Star Wars Young Jedi Adventures, which has been on Disney Plus for about a month now. We're going to be chatting about it in this episode. And for that discussion, I have invited back onto the show, my friend and fellow Laughing Place contributor, Alex Reif. Alex, how are you?
I'm good. How about you, Mike?
Doing well. Glad to have you back. What have you been up to lately at Laughing Place? I know you went on a bit of a trip down to Austin, Texas.
Yeah, I was just there for the ATX TV Festival. With the writer's strike, it was kind of an interesting vibe because every single panel had to acknowledge, hey, there's a strike going on and it's important and yada yada. But among the people who were there was Simpsons showrunner Matt Selman. And as some of your listeners might know, you do episode recaps of The Simpsons pretty much every Sunday night.
I do. I want to make an addendum here that about a year or two ago, I changed it from just doing the recaps to doing recaps / reviews because I wanted to make it a little bit more interesting for myself. So I do kind of give my opinion on each episode in addition to kind of listing what happened.
Yeah, well, so Matt Selman, the showrunner, did a panel that was just 30 minutes, but I also had the opportunity to interview him for about 15. And what was fun was he knew the name Laughing Place. He knew it because of you, because of and he just basically was so appreciative that we're doing these weekly recaps. So, and I was like, well, the credit, I can't take it. It's not me. So I was trying to pass it along to you. He was very appreciative. And he also had a really good philosophy on Simpsons. He described it as a superhighway and people get on it and off it at different points, but there's always traffic in terms of fans who have their core years. Somebody had asked during the panel about that. People will say these are my seasons. I don't like the others. And he's like, yeah, it just depends on when you got on the highway, when you got off the highway.
That's a very interesting perspective, and that's a much better outcome of this conversation than I was worried about. Because I've written some glowing reviews recently. There were some great episodes this season, and I've also written some not so great reviews of episodes that I did not care for this time around. But I'm glad that he is paying attention. I'm glad that I don't know. It's interesting to have that kind of direct line to the showrunner of The Simpsons, which is a show that you and I have both grown up on. We recorded that episode all about The Simpsons and Star Wars previously. How was the rest of the festival for you?
Yeah, it was actually really good. I don't know if it was just this festival naturally is a smaller scale because I've only ever covered it virtually before. But it was much more consolidated than South by Southwest, which is also in Austin and uses some of the same venue spaces. And I found it to just be real easy peasy. Probably my favorite festival in terms of ease of access.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I had a really good time. I really enjoyed it. I think anybody can buy a ticket if you're a TV fan to go. So definitely look into that. It's typically every May or early June in Austin.
So it's kind of like Paley Fest out here in LA a little bit.
Yeah, it definitely is. FX premiered Justified City Primeval, which is the sequel series to Justified. Freeform had a couple of shows going there. Obviously, we had Simpsons, which is 20th Television, but also Fox. Hulu was there for This Fool. And then my last day there was spent with podcasters who are former Disney stars. So I got to hobnob with people who probably mean nothing to you because this wasn't your era of television. Definitely not kid-focused television, but I got to talk with Christy Carlson Romano from Even Stevens, Annalisa Vanderpool from That's So Raven, all three Lawrence brothers, Joey, Matthew, and Andy, and then plus the cast of Nickelodeon's Ned's Survival Guide, something bigger title. That's not funny to me.
Of all those names, the only one I knew was Joey Lawrence, having
Whoa.
a little bit of loss of growing up. Okay, so if you're out there watching live on the Laughing Place YouTube channel, please comment along or ask any questions you may have. Let's say hi to Alexander Lee and Sonia Pan. I always say the last name wrong, Sonia. I'm sorry. Panto.
Pantoja.
Sorry about that. But yeah, thank you for joining in. Let's do the 5 Star Wars questions. This is your 4th time on the show, if I'm doing my math right, Alex. It's season 4 of Who's the Bossk. You've been on each season once, so you're up to 5 Star Wars questions level 4. Are you ready for this one?
Yes.
Okay. Number 1 of the 5 Star Wars questions level 4. We're going to start out in remaining in the Star Wars universe. Then this one kind of branches off into tangential stuff. So number 1 is, what is your favorite Star Wars weapon? And if you're picking a lightsaber or a blaster, please be specific as to its model or owner. So we're kind of getting in the weeds here a little bit. Do you have a favorite Star Wars weapon, Alex?
That is really in the weeds. Gosh. I mean, when I think Star Wars weapon, lightsabers, the first thing that comes to mind, or any kind of a blaster that goes pew pew.
Yeah.
But I think I'm gonna go with, what is Boba Fett's like staff thing from Book of Boba? Does that count?
Oh, the gaffy stick that the Tusken Raiders use?
Yeah. Does that count as a
Yeah.
weapon?
Oh, it's absolutely a weapon. Yeah, definitely. And a big deal is made of it and kind of its construction in the Book of Boba Fett. So yeah, that definitely counts. That's a great choice.
I'm going with that to break away from my first instinct, which was lightsaber and generic.
Okay. Okay, number 2. Which now this is kind of getting into the outside of Star Wars, outside the box kind of question. Which Star Wars actor has had your favorite career outside of Star Wars?
Oh gosh, this is a tough one. I mean, it's hard to not go with like Carrie Fisher, or Natalie Portman, obviously is a chameleon of an actress and has done so much. But prior to her joining Star Wars, and I think it's so cute that she doesn't care at all about Star Wars, I've been an Amy Sedaris fan.
Yes.
And it's like, just like her whole like at the expo being on stage and someone being like, were you familiar with Star Wars? She's like, oh yeah, it's a dream come true. Just, totally bogus answer. She had never seen a Star Wars before her friend John Favreau asked her to come play.
Right.
So I'm tempted to say her. HBO Max prior removed her show At Home with Amy Sedaris, but if it ever appears anywhere on another streaming service, I highly recommend it to everyone.
That would be a great segue into a conversation I'm going to have with you a little bit later on in the show, but we're going to continue. I do want to say, yeah, I love that Jon Favreau and whoever else is casting the Mandalorian and the Mandoverse of series has brought in all these comedic actors and comedians to play roles in those shows. So many of my favorites have popped up. I mean, Bill Burr, another one that I never thought would ever step foot in something like Star Wars. So interesting to see that type of act or performer in the Star Wars galaxy. Amy Sedaris is definitely one of them. I've enjoyed her work on Strangers with Candy on Comedy Central years and years ago. Yeah.
And I passed Timothy Oliphant in the hotel hallway at ATX.
Yeah.
And at first all I could think of was Mandalorian. And then I was like, oh wait, no, you're here for this other FX thing.
It's funny, like Timothy Oliphant always plays, he seems to always play like a marshal.
He is just a Western cowboy who doesn't play by the rules in everything. Right. That's what he does best.
I mean, I knew him originally from Deadwood, where he was the sheriff of Deadwood, the old West town, and then of course in Justified, he's a U.S. Marshal, and then in Book of Boba Fett, he's the Marshal of Mos Pelgo, and then he was on Fargo. Are you watching the Fargo?
Oh,
series?
I have it. It's too gory for my taste, or at least it was when I tried to get into it, way back when.
I think he was also a U.S. Marshal in that. So yeah, definitely typecast, but always very entertaining performer. All right, number 3, same question but with director. So which Star Wars director has had your favorite career outside of Star Wars. This is anyone who has directed Star Wars in a movie, in a TV show, anything like that.
Yeah, I'm just so in awe of Jon Favreau,
Yeah.
that I don't think I can pick anyone but him, and he still, to this day, has my favorite of all the Disney, animated to live action reimaginings. Jungle Book,
Yeah.
I think nothing has touched it. He also has one of the worst, but we'll not talk about that one. But yeah, no, I'm a huge fan of his, and obviously everything he did with Marvel. And it's also fun to just like catch him in old stuff from back when he was an actor and not yet
Right.
directing, like his famous Friends episode.
Friends, The Sopranos, when he would guest start on that, I really liked that episode. And yeah, when I walked out of the Lion King, the Jon Favreau Lion King, I honestly wasn't even thinking about like how does this movie function as a remake. I was floored by the Lion King. You wouldn't even call it live action; it's really animated. But
It's
I
not live
was
action.
floored by that as a kind of an experimental film, and I really think that the tech that they came up with to make both Jungle Book and The Lion King played into what they developed with the volume and the technology they call the stagecraft software, whatever, for the Mandalorian. That all this stuff kind of fed into each other, and I think it's really like inarguably going to be the future of filmmaking, which we've talked about on this podcast before. But yeah, the innovations that he's made, I think he really, as a filmmaker, has kind of earned his spot right now as kind of the next generation. Well, he's got to be 50 years old, but the generation after George Lucas, kind of taking up that mantle of pushing the limit as far as what can be accomplished with that kind of filmmaking. So yeah, Jon Favreau is a great choice. Number 4. Oh, this is a good one. I like this one. What's your favorite Star Wars reference or Easter egg in other media? So we did a whole episode about Simpsons Star Wars references, but you can pick a Simpsons one if you want. Any Star Wars reference or Easter egg in other media?
I feel like I gotta choose a non-Simpsons, just because we did a whole Simpsons episode. One of my favorite, it's also like an adult animated series developed in the wake of the Simpsons success, but Family Guy has those like Blue Harvest trilogy, and I think it's the Emperor, like whoever was emulating the Emperor in it goes like something dark side, something complete. And I love that. Like it's so perfect. That is Emperor dialogue. He's hard to understand, but you know these like 2 words that Ian McDermott just enunciates. So
I think it is Seth MacFarlane doing the Emperor's voice in the specials, and he does a very very funny impression of Ian. He's a huge Star Wars fan, so it's cool. It's always cool to see the Family Guy riffs on Star Wars, which they've done quite a bit. All sorts of Lucasfilm stuff. They've done Indiana Jones references a bunch in those shows.
I'm pretty sure they've done Willow.
Well, I'm sure Willow has come up at some point in the run of Family Guy. Number 5, what is your favorite Lucasfilm project outside of the Star Wars franchise? We've had a lot of Indiana Jones choices on this, but you can pick anything that has come from Lucasfilm or George Lucas as a producer.
I was going to ask that. Like, does it have to be like Lucasfilm is the entity that owns it now? Because I love Labyrinth.
Yeah, I would say that counts. I covered it as part of my I covered that as part of my retrospective. I would say Labyrinth counts. I had my friend Paul on the podcast to talk about that. What do you love about Labyrinth?
I mean, I credit it with my really kind of like getting into classic rock and David Bowie. I had been watching Labyrinth probably before I was super conscious. Like I've never not known Labyrinth. We would rent it from the video store often. It was one of our like Halloween movies because it was fairly dark for being family friendly. I mean, just anything Jim Henson, like it's got the funny Jim Henson sensibilities to it, while also being quite dark and a departure from him. I'm not as big of a fan of Dark Crystal. I feel like Dark Crystal is just dark
Yeah,
all the way. Like nothing about Dark Crystal makes me laugh. Whereas the whole how do we get how do we get through this labyrinth? And that little worm being like, oh, don't go that way. Nobody goes that way. And so they don't. And then after they leave, it's like, if you'd gone that way, you would have gone straight to the castle. Just like all those little
Yeah.
bits. I just love. So I think the characters, the music definitely always stuck with me. And because of that, when I got into high school and realized none of my guy friends are also into Spice Girls and Britney Spears, which I'm wearing my Spice Girl Ewok shirt that I got at
Nice.
Celebration today. But when I realized I wasn't fitting in with my normal musical tastes, I quickly diverted. I was like, oh, classic rock. I'll start with David Bowie. And then that was like Under Pressure was my segue into Queen, who I knew through like Wayne's World a little bit. But like, I kind of like found this path to music that I could relate to with my peers through David Bowie via Labyrinth.
I love it. Yeah, it's great when you're exposed to music through movies or TV and you kind of have that little touchstone and then you build on it from there. And yeah, I love Labyrinth as well. You can go back if you're interested, go back and listen to that whole episode that Paul and I recorded back in season 2 of Who's the Bossk. Okay, that's the end of the 5 Star Wars questions. And right now I want to throw to an interview that I did that is connected to our main topic for this episode, Star Wars Young Jedi Adventures. I got to chat with one of the voice actors. His name is Jamal Avery Jr. He's the voice of Kai Brightstar, one of the main characters of Young Jedi Adventures. And it was a big thrill to get to talk with him. He's a young actor, obviously. Not sure exactly how old he is, 12 or 13, I want to guess. But it was just terrific to talk with him about his role as Kai Brightstar in Young Jedi Adventures and hear all about how he got the role and what the process was like in recording the part and his connection to Star Wars in general. So let's throw to that interview. If you're watching this, by the way, on the YouTube stream, you're not going to hear the interview, but later on you can go and listen to the audio version of this podcast and hear my interview with Jamal Avery Jr. cut in, or it's also in video form here on the Laughing Place YouTube channel. So here's me chatting with Jamal Avery Jr. And that was my interview with Star Wars Young Jedi Adventures voice actor, star Jamal Avery Jr. He's the voice of Kai Brightstar. And we're going to be talking more about Young Jedi Adventures in just a little bit here. But first, I want to get through just a few headlines this week. So still not a ton of Star Wars related news coming out, but a few Lucasfilm related things that I want to chat with you about, Alex. The first one is the Galactic Star Cruiser, which we found out is closing. This news came out 2 or 3 weeks ago. We did that whole episode talking about that, but now we know once they reopened the Galactic Star Cruiser for bookings, the final cruise is going to be the end of September. So I think it was like a week and a half ago, they reopened the Star Cruiser. You can book your trip to go back. I know everybody was having trouble logging into the website or making calls to their travel agents to try to get a spot. And we know now that it is completely booked through the end of the run. And I think that's good news. It's great that people are showing support, even though it's not going to do much to save it, I don't think. But it is cool to know that, once people found out that this was going away, that it was pretty fast for it to fill up for the rest of these few months that are left. Now, Alex, you got to go on the Galactic Star Cruiser. What were your thoughts when you heard the news about it shuttering in the fall?
I was shocked. I don't think that's an outcome that I had expected, given that it's fairly unprecedented for Disney World to open something on that scale and then close it so quickly. I mean, NBA Experience, I think, may have lasted less long, but I mean, NBA Experience was in a pre-existing building that had been there, for a long time. It was 2 floors of the 4 that was Disney Quest in that building. So, and that building is still there. Like, what happens to this space is in limbo, because my understanding is they're doing this to write it off and have a better looking corridor. And if you're doing that, you would have to pay that back in the future if you were to revive it somehow. I can't see them doing that. So yeah, it's really sad, because I thought the experience was great. It was way better than I had even expected it to be. And I went in expecting to enjoy it. I just didn't expect to enjoy it as much as I did. And I'm sad I'll never get another Chandrilla Starline waffle, because those were really, really good. Although I'd heard, like, one of the things that this prompted on Twitter was conversations about people's experiences. And I was hearing from people who had gone, early on, like we did, and then who went later on and said that experience really drastically changed. Like, the food changed and for the worse.
Oh,
That the character experiences also seemed to dip. Like, they just
interesting.
weren't as engaged. Maybe it was just, a different cast or whatever. People were complaining about Sandro. Like, I guess he had lost his tails, his Togruta or whatever they call him, by the end of it.
Montrals, I think they're called.
Montrals. Yeah. By the end of it, like, whoever was Sandro, like the actors playing Sandro, weren't given them to wear. Like, at one point it was like a choice, you could wear it or not wear it. At a certain point it was like, costuming's not dealing with it, you don't get them. So, like, weird things like that, where people were just like watching, levels of it already get stripped away, and being kind of disenchanted by that. And I'm still surprised, if they were having money issues, that they never made any attempt to sell me merchandise, because everything was sold out when I went on the ship that I wanted. Like, any
Right.
like a t-shirt that said I went on Chandrilla Starline. You could not get that in an adult size. And they told us, like, oh, you'll have like a month to have priority access on Shop Disney if it appears. And it never appeared, and still hasn't appeared on Shop Disney. And, like, if you want to make like $30, then contact me, sell me a t-shirt. Like, I wanted a souvenir and you weren't selling them to me. So, there's things like that where I'm still like, how did that move through? Because Disney doesn't do anything without dumping you into a gift shop and trying to sell you on something. And I walked away from Star Cruiser with just a magnet.
Yeah, I must have got lucky when I was there, because I was able to get a large adult size t-shirt.
Oh, I think you were on one of the first
going by outside.
Yeah, you were on one of the first cruises ever, right? Like, we were on, I think, the fourth. Like, our cruise, they had just gotten the pin that they're supposed to give you when you go to Batuu back in stock. And I guess the cruise before us got a sticker because they had run out of the pin somehow. And they had told those people they were going to get their pin. And, like, I'm still seeing people on Twitter saying, I never got my pin that was included in the price.
I wasn't on the first cruise. I think we went like the third week. But they still had a lot of that stuff in stock when I was there. And I'm surprised to hear you say that you heard people had a bad experience going later, because I actually heard kind of the opposite, where people who went later felt like, because there were smaller crowds, smaller attendance, that they got more attention from the characters. So it was kind of a better experience from them. So I guess it kind of depends on which cruise you ended up going on. And I hope that in these last few months that guests are able to have, the top tier galactic stuff. I hope they pull out all the stops and get everything that is promised to them, as you listed there. And now that it's completely booked, it doesn't look like I'm going to get the chance to go again either. So I'm really glad that I got to have my experience as you did as well. And sad to see it go. Interesting. I'll be interested to hear if and what happens with the building, like you mentioned. That's a very big question going into this removal of that experience. So another Lucasfilm related headline, I just want to mention that I received another box of Indiana Jones merchandise. You might recall about a month ago or so, I unboxed a big box of Hasbro Indiana Jones toys that they sent over on the Laughing Place YouTube channel. And just this past week, I received another box that was just like general Indiana Jones merchandise from a variety of licensees, Lucasfilm licensees. So that video is now live on Laughing Place YouTube channel. There's going to be a bunch of Indiana Jones content coming up, both on this podcast and on laughingplace.com as we get closer and closer to this new movie, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. What are your thoughts right now on Dial of Destiny, Alex? You looking forward to this fifth and maybe final Indiana Jones movie?
I'm really, really excited. I think I think this is my second most anticipated movie of the summer.
Okay.
Behind Barbie. So
I'm actually,
but that's just me.
I will admit to being excited for Barbie as well. I like Greta Gerwig as a filmmaker. I've seen the trailers. The trailers look really funny. The thing I'm probably excited the most about for Barbie, though, is it's coming out the same day as Oppenheimer, the new Christopher Nolan like historical biopic about
Yeah.
the guy who helped develop the atomic bomb. Um, Really, really want to do a double feature of Oppenheimer and Barbie. I think that would be so perfect.
Have you seen all the tweets people are doing of like me heading like either exiting Barbie and heading into Oppenheimer, or me leaving Oppenheimer and heading into
No,
Barbie?
I haven't seen
Oh,
that.
they're so funny. They're so funny. So it'll be like a man coming out of like a business meeting and then like taking off his jacket, like removing the clip-on tie, and then he's got like just like a slutty tank top on underneath, like a, gay man doing these kinds of things. Or it'll be like someone very flamboyant suddenly like puts on camo, and then they're like now going into Oppenheimer. Like I just came out of Barbie. Whichever way you're going, they're very funny.
That's pretty
Twitter's
good.
having a good time with it.
Yeah, I had the idea to go and do the double feature in theaters when it comes out, and I want to make a T-shirt that's just like Margot Robbie's face, like superimposed over a mushroom cloud. Like
Oh.
that's what I would like. But I think you gotta do Oppenheimer first to get like the really dramatic,
Yeah, Barbie
intense.
should uplift you rather than
Yeah,
you don't want to go
Barbie.
from a sugar high of Barbie to the
Right.
realities of Oppenheimer.
Barbie is the dessert following the
This will be
meal
funny
of
to see like
yeah.
box office metrics of like the 10 p.m. show of Barbie was empty, but the 4 p.m. show was all sold out, and then 10 p.m. Oppenheimers were full.
Right.
Um, just everybody doing this. It would be awesome.
Yeah, looking forward to that. The last thing I want to talk to you about, I've been kind of saving this. It got mentioned on this podcast. Actually, as the news broke, Kyle came into the live chat a few weeks ago and told us in the comments in the chat that Disney had made the announcement it was removing all this content from Disney Plus. One of those pieces of content was the live action sequel series Willow, which is made by Lucasfilm, and we've talked about on this podcast before as well. So I have a lot of feelings. I have a lot of thoughts about this. I was pretty angry about it actually for about a week, and I just it's left a very bad taste in my mouth the way that this has happened. I mean, I understand the Galactic Star Cruiser closing. I get, if Disney's not making money on that, it seems like a big thing to keep running. But as far as like content that has been made already and is out there already, to just kind of take it away, and as there's no legal way to consume any of this. I'm sure if you wanted to track it down on some illegal content file sharing site, you probably could, but there's no DVDs. You can't buy the digital file or download it anywhere, so it's just gone. So I was curious what your thoughts have been about this since that news broke.
No, I hate it. I'm also, fairly disenchanted with Disney Plus because of it. Because
Yeah.
when this all started, HBO Max was the first one to kind of famously start
Yes.
doing this. But at least in their case, for the most part, like the big headlines were things that were in production or hadn't yet been released that they were, preemptively canceling and writing off. They did certainly remove some things, and the big casualty to me was the Elmo Not So Late show,
Yeah.
which if you haven't seen it, I'm sorry for you. It's gone, and it was wonderful. But yeah, no, it's very sad. There's things where like I did so much press for it. Like
Right.
I did a review. I went to a junket. I had one-on-ones, like where I'm hearing like, oh, such and such is gone forever, and I'm like, like I did so much work on that show.
Yeah, and imagine
Like
imagine
behind
how
the
the
scenes,
people
and
who
I'm
made it feel
right,
like.
exactly. Like that's what I was thinking. Like I can only imagine if I'm feeling this way, having just like tried to help promote it and then keep the conversation going as it was like weekly episode releases going. I can only imagine what it's like to have actually worked on it. Like Bill Farmer's show, it's a Dog's Life, where
Yeah.
that could not have been an expensive show. Bill and his wife produced it. His son wrote the theme song. I'm like, what are the royalties like on this show that warrant it being pulled and removed forever. The Howard doc, thankfully, got
Right.
enough traction on Twitter when the list of what was on the chopping block was revealed, and Disney reversed course. And that's another one where, like, you know who's making money, because outside of like Little Shop of Horrors and Smile, all of these songs are Disney songs. Alan Menken is the other, rights entity. Don Hahn, a Disney legend, produced it. Who is making the Howard Ashman documentary so cost prohibitive that it's worth more dead than alive?
Right.
And I have seen a really funny meme going around from the producers of, this content we made for streaming is worth more off the service than it is
Yeah.
on, where they're like plotting to like make something bad so they can cash in. So yeah, I just don't get it. There's a lot of things where, like Stargirl, I got to do the set visit for. That's gone. Grace VanderWaal was the protagonist in that. She's got her own musical fan base. And the thing that's weird about a lot of these is like the music is lingering on. Like if you go on any music streaming service, you
Yeah.
can stream both Stargirl soundtracks. You just can't watch Stargirl. What's more expensive? Like, why? I don't get it. So yeah, it is weird. The fact that they're writing it off in such a way where they can't do a home media release of these, like whatever potential residuals, which my understanding was they bought everyone out of their residuals for Disney Plus stuff anyway.
Okay.
So it's like, why would it continue to cost you money? Like, I just don't understand the financing of it. Benji's explained it to me, but I still think it's like, this is just bookkeeping nonsense. Like,
Yeah.
at the end of your Excel spreadsheet, it'll say 0, but in the end of the day, you've spent that money already. Like,
Right.
what are we saving? I just don't get it. So yeah, I think it's very sad. It's very disheartening. And like one of the things that I was super excited for that came out, exactly a year ago was Better Nate Than Ever. Where the main protagonist, they don't overtly say he's gay. He's only like a 12-year-old boy, but it's very clear that that's what's happening. And he's experiencing, all this oppression where he is. And he runs away to New York City to audition for Lilo and Stitch the musical, and finds his aunt, played by Lisa Kudrow, who is supportive of him when his family isn't. And like, it was a really cute film. It was the kind of thing where, like, if I had seen it as a kid, like that was what really stuck with me, was like, if this was there when I was a kid, I felt like I could have shown this to my parents and been like, I feel this way. Like, I don't have words for it, but this is how I feel. And had a dialogue. And like the fact that one is gone just guts me, because like the other thing that's even in that category on Disney Plus or even most streamers is the Trevor Project musical Trevor, which is such a sad story. It's not as accessible because it is a filmed version of a stage musical. Like, it just doesn't, you're kind of disassociated with it already because it is 3 walls and, the camera angles just go center, left, right, repeat in the edit, so like at a certain point you're like, yeah, I'm watching something other people watched in person and I'm not there. So yeah, I really hate it. I'm disappointed in, I mean, not that other streaming services aren't doing it or haven't done it, but like with the Max rebrand, which having to download a separate app aside, which was stupid. But other than that, because it was like Warner Brothers Discovery merging multiple things, other content came in that kind of filled a void in some way.
Yeah.
Like, there are things that were on Discovery Plus that I wasn't going to buy Discovery Plus to watch, but now they're on Max, so now I'm watching them. So it's like, it felt like there was some level of value add. For Disney Plus, for Hulu, this is just removal. Like,
right.
They've already slowed down what they're making, what they're adding. So I'm just like, why did this have to happen? I don't get it.
Yeah. It feels like a very crass decision to me. And I keep putting myself in the head, or trying to put myself in the head of like an up and coming creative person, or even a established creative person in the industry who's, has a meeting to work with Disney or Disney Plus or make something for them. And my thought being that person would be, well, why would I make something if there's this potential for it to literally disappear, like with no no way for anyone to consume it. And it seems like you said, since they are claiming this on their taxes, it doesn't seem like it's going to get a re-release at any time soon. And
Yeah,
then
no,
even
I would not hold my breath for like a Willow Blu-ray release of
yeah,
the series where, diehard fans could own it and just have it,
right,
and they could potentially have found another revenue stream for it. Um, but no, that like if they're writing it off, they would have to pay to unwrite it off to put it on a disc.
yeah,
So really your only option, I don't typically condone piracy, except
right.
in the case where the studio has no intention to make any money off it.
And
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 so
it
this is one
sucks
of
that
those
the
cases
yeah,
where,
if
like,
it,
I would not fault you if you went and downloaded
right.
Willow.
I do kind of feel the same way, and I probably will want to rewatch Willow at some point, and I'll have to go and download it illegally somewhere. And I'm sorry to say that, but what bugs me about that the most is that the people who made it are not going to get anything from that. They don't. First of all,
Yeah,
I mean, I don't
piracy
know.
is not a victimless crime. I don't know if you've
Right.
ever popped in a
I
Blu-ray
I
disc in the past
agree.
10
I
years.
agree. I tend not to pirate things. I for a
Yeah,
long time. I guess I did a little bit as a freshman in college.
we were all poor college or high school
Yeah.
kids at once. Like I once had a Napster account.
Yeah.
We've all been there, but especially if you're somebody who's tuned into the industry or following it closely, like you have a passion around these people. You don't want to steal from them. This is their
Yeah.
livelihood. And I mean, with the writers' strike, that's probably one of the arguments the studios are making is, we can't afford this stuff because not everyone pays for the stuff. It's like, well,
Yeah.
crack down on that. And they do in some cases, but yeah, this stuff is wild.
Yeah, it also bugs me that like nothing is allowed to be like a cult hit anymore. It's not allowed to like find its footing, like find an audience over time. Like I
Yeah.
feel like there were movies that were not successful theatrically when we were younger that played
Yeah.
on cable, or you would see it on the VHS, the Blockbuster video shelf and rent it. But like now
Hocus
it's either
Pocus.
yeah,
Disney Plus's most successful, original film launch is Hocus
yeah,
Pocus 2. Hocus Pocus was a box office bomb in 93. It really didn't become popular, like colloquially, until, 2005 or so, thanks to
yeah,
ABC Family, really like forcing it on people every year. And then people grew a loving for it. And, that's just one of those cases. Like they just greenlit or there's rumors of a Hocus Pocus 3. Like it
right,
seems like there's a lot of traction for a third one, which I didn't love Hocus Pocus 2, so I don't care if they make another one. But
yeah,
yeah, like that's a perfect example of something where only because it had a re-release
yeah,
component to it or a place by which people could find it did it get another life. And yeah, you won't see anything like that. Dark Crystal, I don't believe, was a big hit either.
no,
It had a Netflix series. Like
yeah,
that wouldn't have happened without home video releases, without TV airings, without fan conventions and people being like, "I love Dark Crystal. You've never seen Dark Crystal? You got to see Dark Crystal." You
yeah.
know, like,
Nothing
and
can
that's not
be yeah. Nothing
you
is
can't have
allowed to
that
be
here.
a sleeper hit anymore. Like either it's an immediately a huge success, or we're just erasing it from existence. That's
Yeah,
a very dark future for the
which is crazy
entertainment
because
industry.
probably the biggest film last year at the domestic box office was Top Gun Maverick.
Yeah,
That's a
right.
sequel to
Yeah,
a film that had not had any other entries in the franchise
yeah,
for 30 years.
yeah,
Uh, this year, where Indiana Jones is probably going to be one of the biggest films of the
yeah.
year, and not counting the really bad Kingdom of the Crystal Skulls from 2008, 2009.
Uh-huh.
Not counting that one, there hadn't really been one for a long, long time, and most people
Yeah.
don't count that one.
Well, I think we can both agree that this is a disheartening decision on Disney's part, and it's disappointing to us as fans. I guess it makes sense to them financially, but I think in the long run, I don't know. My gut is that it's going to come back to bite them where the sun don't shine
Yeah, no,
eventually.
I would totally expect, conversations with big creatives,
Yeah,
probably not like a John Favreau, but like it's a bad example because he's already at DC, but someone like a James Gunn who like now that you're done with Guardians, what are you going to do? If he
right.
wasn't doing that DC deal, you know, he could have easily been working on some kind of a development deal with Disney, that would have been tailored for Disney Plus. And I could totally see him being the kind of guy saying like, actually, I just watched you pull Ron
Yeah,
Howard's thing, Willow. Like, I don't know
right,
that I want to work with you
right.
on that. Yeah.
We'll
Also, if they
see.
wanted to pull something, Robert Zemeckis' Pinocchio was terrible. I don't know anybody. I don't know anybody who likes that, and that was expensive. Pull that. I'm never gonna watch that again. Are you? Like,
I have
let's
not.
be honest.
I can't say I have watched it yet, but
Don't
maybe I'll
start it.
check it out
It's not
before
good.
it. Okay. All right. Let's dive into our main topic for this week's episode. We just a little bit ago we listened to the interview. Well, you listened to it if you're listening to the audio version. I did with Jamal Avery Jr. He voiced Kai Brightstar in Star Wars Young Jedi Adventures. So that's what we're going to be talking about this week. Like I said, it's been out there for about a month. Just for a couple different reasons, we haven't had a chance to talk about it at length yet here on the podcast. So I want to start this off by asking you, Alex, what did you know about this series before you got the chance to watch it? And did you have any expectations for this going in?
Yeah, I knew it was. I knew it was being done for Disney Junior. And with what I do, I've been covering Disney Junior content as an adult without preschoolers for about a decade. So I had expectations about like the structure of the show. I was pretty confident it would be a half hour of content divided into two stories.
Yeah.
That there would be a huge, social component to the education piece of it. And then obviously it's going to tame everything down, be very bright colors. And then I knew that it was set in the High Republic era. Those were kind of the two pieces. Obviously the marketing artwork of Nubs over here.
I've got my Nubs plush behind me.
I've got my nameless pink Ewok from Mattel with me as my little snuggle buddy. But yeah, I knew, like, I'd seen that artwork. So that was basically all I knew before I went in. And I had not watched the shorts before diving into the first like half hour episode. I did go back and rewatch those.
So
What about you?
I think I had heard pretty much the same stuff through the marketing that had come out. It did start with 6 shorts that launched on YouTube on April 24th of this year, and they were spaced out, I think, one a week, building up. Or no, it must have been more than that. Must have been like 2 or 3 a week because it built up to the release of the first 7 full-length episode on May the 4th this year on Disney Junior and Disney Plus. So they did kind of a simultaneous release on cable, paid cable, or I guess it's basic cable, and then the Disney Plus streaming service. So once you did get to watch the shorts and the series, what were your initial thoughts on Young Jedi Adventures?
Yeah, I mean, I think it taps into what a parent would want their kids exposed to if they like, if I'm a parent and I'm a Star Wars fan and I want to introduce my, preschool age child to Star Wars in a way that's not going to result in them, wanting to hit a friend with a stick, enacting a lightsaber fight, those kinds of things. It does all that. It brings in the types of creatures in a way that's not going to, scare kids, because that was a factor for me with Star Wars as a little one, as a youngling. But it also is, it's colorful, it's fun. Where it kind of diverts from your typical Disney Junior thing is I have not experienced any songs in the show, like any true moments of like, we're going to sing a song about we're going here. And, most of the Disney Junior shows have that like going on a mission song that's like in every episode. For Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, it was the hot dog dance, So, it doesn't have those moments, which is kind of the surprise to me. Like I was expecting it to have something like that, and it doesn't. But other than that, it's like right in line with what I typically expect from Disney Junior with anything that, they are creating themselves.
It's funny that you mentioned the song thing, because I before we started recording here, I rewatched all the shorts, and then I rewatched the full first episode and part of the second one. And there was a moment in, I think, that second episode where the pilot girl, what's her name? Nash Durango. She was singing the song about, she just like launched into the song about, I'm going on adventure with my Jedi friends. Hope our fun never ends. And then they all like look at her weird, and she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry. Sometimes I make up songs." And I almost wonder if that little moment was like a hint.
I'm
Like
sure that was an internal writer's room of people who had worked on other Disney Junior shows being like, wait, we're not required to shoehorn in a song. We can go song free. Well, we're gonna make fun of that. Like,
Right, right.
I'm sure that was them like celebrating a little bit. They're like, oh, we don't have to write around a song.
Yeah. I did enjoy this show. I think if I were a kid of the target demographic, I would be into it. Obviously, neither of us are that age, but it reminds me a bit of Muppet Babies, actually. Growing up, did you have that feeling as well? Like,
I did, yeah. So like my first exposure to Muppets was Muppet Babies,
yeah,
and that like perfectly weaned me on to Muppet Christmas Carol was like the first Muppet movie that came out during
yeah,
my lifespan. And yeah, it was like that perfect transition, and I can totally see this helping kids into Lego Star Wars content,
right.
which is like the next level up, which then leads into like the classic trilogies, and then leads into everything else. Like, once you're at that level where you're not
Right.
gonna like beat up your friends with a baseball bat because you're pretending it's a lightsaber, you're good.
Let's see. We got a comment about the show. So it said, yes, it was non-offensive. No sort of politics. The only thing which made me cringe was when I thought about continuity. We'll get into that in a little bit too.
I'm sure you had some moments too.
Yeah. But I just want to give like a brief rundown of what the show is about. Like you said, it takes place during the High Republic era, which is a couple hundred years before the original trilogy, before the Skywalker saga, as they say. It takes place on the planet Tenoo, Tenoo. And it's about a group of young Jedi, as you would guess from the title, who are in training to become, I guess the next step for them would be Padawan after this. I think they're technically called initiates at this point in their Jedi careers. And they go on all sorts of adventures. They have a friend who is a non-Jedi, who is a pilot, who has her own ship. I want to talk about that a little bit later as well. But yeah, they have they have a nemesis who's a pirate, who's also a child. But a lot of children characters. Then there's some older characters. Let's go through. I want to go through the credits on this real quick. So the supervising director of Young Jedi Adventures is Elliot M. Bauer, who has worked on Elena of Avalor. That's Disney Junior as well, right, Alex?
So Elena of Avalor was a hybrid. It was like Disney Junior plus Disney Channel.
Okay.
They aired it on both. It was a spinoff of Sophia the First, and the intention was you started on Sophia the First, and then when you were getting to Disney Channel age, but not quite yet, you would go to Elena of Avalor. It was like weaning you off of Disney Junior and onto Disney Channel.
Okay.
So it was like Elena of Avalor would have those like almost Dora the Explorer type moments where they'd be like, "Hi, friend, this is why we did this today. It means this." Right. And then Elena of Avalor, they would, skip all that.
That just makes me think of G.I. Joe. You might be a little,
pal, you got to do it.
Right, exactly. Knowing is half the battle. They had to, I think there was
if you don't share your pudding cup with your friends at school, you're a tyrant.
I think there was some kind of congressional act in the 80s where
there was
yeah
there was a mandate that like anything that was airing aimed at kids on Saturday mornings, during which commercials, like there were all these legalities, but like during which commercials were going to advertise toys and cereals with a mascot, had to have an educational component. And one of my favorite examples is Sailor Moon, when they brought that over, because they had to like edit in this whole Sailor Moon says thing at the end of each episode. And people have parodied it so much on like TikTok, where they'll make these things where they're like, Sailor Moon says, and they'll like use clips from the show that are like, them doing bad things. And it's like, don't actually plug your friend's nose with Kleenex. They can't breathe.
The executive producers on this show are James Wog. I think I'm saying that right. Who works at Lucasfilm. He did Star Wars Visions as well, the animated anthology series. Jackie Lopez, who has done some of those Disney Gallery behind the scenes series and featurettes on Disney Plus. Josh Rhimes, who is responsible for some of the Lego Star Wars animation specials, like you mentioned before. So that makes sense that we have that connection there. And Michael Olson, who is involved with a show called Puppy Dog Pals. You familiar with that?
I'm very familiar with that.
The composer of the music for this series is Matthew Margeson, who's done some big movies. He did Kingsman: The Secret Service and a few other big action movies. So he's a good guy to pick for, to kind of, he does mimic the John Williams style. He cherry picks some of the themes from the familiar John Williams.
I was going to say
music.
there's quotes.
Yeah.
Like one of my favorite moments, they were flying through asteroids, and all of a sudden it just for 10 seconds did the asteroid theme.
Right.
From
Yes.
Empire.
Yeah, I just rewatched that one. Yeah, that was great. The production companies, of course, are Lucasfilm Animation with Wild Canary Animation and Icon Creative Studio. And then I want to go through the cast of characters here. We've got Kai Brightstar, who is played by Jamal Avery Jr., who you may have heard the interview with earlier on in this episode. Liz Soleil is another young Jedi, played by Juliet Donenfeld. Nash Durango is the pilot character, played by Emma Berman. You've got Nubs, the adorable teddy bear character that everybody's talking about, Blue Teddy Bear. He's voiced by D. Bradley Baker from The Bad Batch.
From everything.
He's his voice is very chameleon, like he could just do anything. And he's a big part of the Star Wars family.
He could even be voicing you right now.
He could be. Master Zia Zana is played by Nassim Pedrad, who I knew from, I think she was on Saturday Night Live for.
She definitely was.
Yeah. RJ-83. Now that droid name has to be a reference to Return of the Jedi and the year that movie came out. I
think that's safe to presume.
Yeah. That droid is voiced by Jonathan Lipow. Hap is voiced by Taron Killam, another SNL alum. EB3 is the droid on the Evil Kids team, voiced by Eric Bauza, a very familiar voice actor. There's a character named Pord, voiced by Sarah Kramer. Tabor is the main villain pirate character, voiced by Trey Diaz Murphy. You've got Maria Gennara, voiced by Cree Summer. Master Yoda, probably the most famous, definitely the most famous Star Wars character who appears regularly on the show. Not voiced by Frank Oz this time, but I do think the person doing him, his name is Piotr Michael, is doing a really good job.
He is.
Both mimicking Frank Oz and what he did, and kind of bringing it into the a comfortable tone for the kids animation. Yeah,
that was one thing that actually really stuck out to me, was having worked in a preschool setting with kids with developmental delays and speech challenges, and working with speech language pathologists to correct those things. They've way dialed down the Yoda speak.
Yes.
Like he speaks much more in a typical sentence structure than, taking the end to the beginning.
Right.
And doing
every like third sentence or so he throws in.
Yeah, he does it he does it just often enough where as an adult you're like, okay, there he is. But for the kids who are learning to speak it English, they're getting your normal sentence structure for the most part.
Yeah, agreed. Then Reyna Zess is played by Danielle Gilbot. Those are all the characters who have been in more than one episode so far. And then I went through the list of all the guest stars, and I had some names that I recognized as well. The comedian Tig Notaro, we talked about comedians coming into the Star Wars universe. She plays Ace Callisto. I enjoyed that role. John DiMaggio, the voice of Bender on Futurama, is a bounty hunter named Anson Strong. I really enjoyed that one. I thought that was a really fun episode. And then Haley Joel Osment, who was a child actor in The Sixth Sense and a bunch of other stuff. He plays a character named Raxlow. And when I watched that episode, I was like, oh, this episode's kind of like a Star Wars version of the Lorax. And then I realized, oh, this character's name is an inverse of the Lorax. It's a Raxlow. So I thought that was funny. And then another familiar name to those who know voice actors, Gary Anthony Williams, plays a character called Zephyr. Did you have any standouts for you among the cast, either in the regulars or the guests, Alex?
No, I actually I didn't look at the cast list going into watching it. Because I forget that Disney Junior does often attract, some names for their shows. I think it's oftentimes the case of they have kids, and so this is something where they can, do something that their kids can see. But yeah, it is the voice casting was great. I had no issues. There was no one who stuck out to me other than just I noticed the Yoda speak being dialed way back, and I was cognizant of why.
Yeah, I thought the cast does a great job. I'm really enjoying all the performances. I like the animation. It's like you said a couple times. It's bright. It's colorful. It's fun to watch. I can definitely see kids being into this. What I do want to talk about, this is kind of the first big question I have for you about this show, and this is the first thing I was really thinking about as I watched even the shorts this comes up in, and it's addressed like very, very briefly in the first full length episode, and then kind of thrown away because I guess you're not supposed to think about it too much. But this is in the Star Wars canon. Technically, these characters do exist in the broader tapestry that we call the Star Wars universe. So I was thinking that these very young characters have a lot of autonomy in, being Jedi trainees, and then especially with the character of Nash Durango, she has her own ship. She like works for like a transport company, and she just go off on adventures on their own.
And when they
Yeah.
ask her, you have your own ship? And she's
Yeah.
like, yeah. And they're like, but you're a kid. And they're like, well,
Yeah.
so are you. And that's it. We're done.
That is the only moment where
That's
this
the
is
explanation.
addressed.
You are
But
too. We're good.
but I was just thinking about maybe things are just different during the High Republic, but I was thinking about like that scene in Attack of the Clones where we see kids of roughly this age, and Yoda's there teaching them like with the training lightsabers how to dodge the blasters from the training droid remotes or whatever. But I couldn't picture those kids in that movie like going off and having an adventure like this. There was even a multi-part episode of the Clone Wars that was about a group of younglings that get lost, but it was like that was the point of that arc. It was a big deal that these younglings had gotten separated from the Jedi Masters and were off on their own. Like that was unusual. I don't know. Did this bother you at all about Young Jedi Adventures?
Only like I thought about it briefly. Like I wouldn't say I was bothered by it, but
Yeah.
certainly like I think my expectation was probably something more like these kids are friends and their Jedi Masters are also like a tight knit group and
Yeah.
go and do everything together, and that like where they go, the kids go. So it'd be like the Jedi Masters go off and we just like hear mentioned what they do. And I kind of thought, since this is canon, right? Like they're
Yes.
not saying this is a separate canon. I kind of thought that stuff might actually segue more into the other High Republic stuff, like the books or whatever. And then we'd see the kids have like a mini adventure. It could be
Right.
something like, we got to this planet and then now that bird is in distress and we need to help that bird.
Yeah.
And so that's the kids' task while the adults are taking on something that is not friendly for their Padawans. So that was where my expectations were. I was thinking of things like, you brought up Puppy Dog Pals. Another recent Disney Junior show is Firebuds, which is humans and cars. So it's like the dad of the boy is a fire chief, and so he wants to be a fireman, and the cars are sentient, and so his best friend is the child of the fire truck, so he'll one day be a fire truck, and so they go together and like go on missions. And then there's also a police officer, there's an EMT,
Right.
like with an ambulance. And so it's like these kids go on smaller adventures and then like meet up at the end of the day with their parents who had a similar thing going on. And so there's this like family coming together moment. And because it's, these Padawans are away, they didn't bring in, there's really only like one Jedi master leader plus Yoda kind of like overseeing this group of kids. So I was expecting something almost like on Rugrats. Like each episode of Rugrats, the premise is the parents start this thing, they put the kids in the playpen and they think they're good and they go off. And then, Tommy uses his little toy screwdriver to open the playpen and they go off and have their little adventure. So I kind of expected something on that level. This is certainly just like, we need to go do this. Hey, friend who can drive somehow at our same age, let's go.
Right.
And like the adults are fully aware they're doing it. And it's funny too, because like, in that first episode, they're going through training and it's like clearly like, oh, you have not mastered the Force yet. And they're like, but then they're like, oh, but it's totally fine. You can go all on your own.
Right.
You got this, little buddy. It's like, what's that Japanese show on Netflix everyone is obsessed with?
The one about that weird twisted game show. Is that what you're talking
It's not a game show, but it's like a reality series. Like you can do it. Like they send like a kid off to do tasks. Like it'll be like run to the grocery store and get me these 3 items and come
Oh, I
back
don't
on your
know
own.
this.
Here's the money. Oh, it's so funny. Kids errands. What's the show called? Old Enough. Old Enough.
No, I
If you
don't know
haven't
this at
seen Old
all.
Enough, you should watch Old Enough. And then there was also a very funny Saturday Night Live sketch making fun of Old Enough. Selena Gomez was the guest, but it was girlfriends sending their boyfriends out to do these tasks. And so like Pete Davidson, and he was, in the store, and he's like, wait, was I supposed to get this one or this one? Like, it's like going through the same things. So like, it's almost like that where the parents are just like, you got this, you're fine, go on. And then like, I'm just going to stand back and watch and smile and laugh at because you're going to fail. Obviously they don't fail, but.
Right. I saw that sketch, the Selena Gomez episode of Saturday Night Live.
It's based on a real show.
Yeah, I think Tori and I were like puzzled about what that was parodying. So clearly we're not aware of this show Old Enough. It's on Netflix.
Well, I also saw the sketch about Be Real, and I didn't realize that was a real app. I thought this was just a joke, and it was very funny in the show. And then I found out it's a real thing. I'm like, wait, people are actually using an app that forces the time of day that you can post and takes a photo of both the front and back camera.
Right.
So you can see everything. I was like, no.
That somehow I did know about, but yeah, somehow Old Enough. I did want to mention what you were address what you were mentioning about the connections to the other stories in the High Republic era, because I was kind of expecting that too. But other than Yoda, who obviously is in this series, he also shows up in the High Republic novels and comics because he's, in the original trilogy, Yoda is 900 years old. He's lived for nearly 1,000 years, so he's going to be around during that time. But other than that, they really haven't connected it too much or at all to what we have seen happening in the other High Republic stories. I know there were theories when the images of the characters came out that the pirate character, whose name is Tabor, might be a Nihil, who's one of the Nihil are the main villains of phase 1 of the High Republic, and they're kind of like marauders. They're also sort of like pirates, but these pirates don't seem connected to them at all. I wonder if they will ever overlap.
This kid's like just a bully. Like,
yeah,
I took your thing that you brought to the playground, and then they're like, how do we get it back?
Right.
And within 12 minutes we got it back.
But adults also seem to be frightened of him and his gang. Like when he shows up to steal things from like the marketplace, the adults are like, no, Tabor, don't steal our stuff anymore. And the young Jedi have to come in to the rescue. So we talked a little about messages before, like in G.I. Joe, but obviously there was that kind of environmental Lorax episode. But did you pick up any other messages or lessons that were targeted at the audience of this series?
Yeah, I mean it's usually stuff of like teamwork.
Yeah.
Sticking together. A lot of the times these shows, when we were kids, there was like Sesame Street style. There was very clearly an actual curriculum in like the educational sense of like today's sponsored by the letter C and or things like that. Now it's much more just social emotional education. So the type of things that because a lot of kids are either getting that through a lot of their play toys, interactions with parents, or a preschool setting. So a lot of times it's more like when you do this to somebody, it hurts, and so that's what I perceived as being the main educational component of this is like the bad kid did this. These kids had hurt feelings because of it. And then when they got it back, they felt good. And I'm sure at some point we'll get a very special episode where like the mean kid is in trouble and they have to help him. And then, he says, thank you, but then is also like, but now I'm going to take this,
Right. The one that stuck out to me was from the Tig Notaro episode, actually, where the lesson was kind of, even if you've done some bad things in your past, you may not be a bad person. Like there's always room for a redemption. And
did this show just cancel culture?
Yeah, actually,
did we just learn that people can change and evolve?
I do feel like Star Wars in its storytelling has always been kind of anti-cancel culture because almost every evil character has been redeemed except like Emperor Palpatine. But yeah,
also every generation has canceled their version of Star Wars only to later fall in love with it again. So
very true. Yeah. So I mean, yeah, as far as like the messages of the show, I think it's doing a good job of like you said, enlightening kids on that kind of social issues as opposed to the ABCs and stuff you would learn from Sesame Street.
Which, if you want that and you want it in Star
Yeah,
Wars, there is a Star Wars alphabet book and a Star Wars numbers book. Like,
sure, sure.
you
So
can get that.
this actually brings me to my next question for you, Alex, because I have noticed over the last really, 5, 6 years since I've been writing about Star Wars professionally, maybe a little bit longer than that, that they've since Disney acquired Lucasfilm, there has been a noticeable effort to create content that will hopefully bring in younger, a new generation of Star Wars fans. I was born after The Empire Strikes Back came out, but I grew up in an era, actually mid to late '80s, when I was a kid. There wasn't a lot of Star Wars coming out, but then they started putting out like novels in the early '90s and all this other material that really got me into the franchise. Um, we've talked about your experience, but what do you think? What do you think the chances are of generating another new generation of Star Wars fans with this kind of content?
I'd say they're really, really good. I mean, kind of like you, I noticed in the post Disney acquisition era of Star Wars that Hasbro, long before they had this, was making preschool age playline Star Wars toys. They were like bigger figures or droids or things like
Yeah,
that. Like, I remember being at Toy Fair and seeing play sets that were aimed at like just at the 3 and up crowd, but not quite yet at like the action figure level. Same with Marvel, and they've done really successful there. And actually, this exact same formula, I just was double checking Disney Plus because I know it's usually trending pretty high. So Spidey and His Amazing Friends is a Disney Junior show to basically wean kids into Marvel at a preschool age, and in a friendly way where anything that would be deemed action is not like directed at hurting somebody.
right.
So very much like this, where like if they're wielding a lightsaber, it's not to hit somebody, it's to block something.
Yeah,
They're very careful with that. So I think it's really good chances. Now, I remember when the shorts came on Disney Plus that those were instantly trending and stayed in there for a while. I just
mhm,
checked the top 20 on Disney Plus, and Clone Wars right now is Clone Wars and Mandalorian are the only Star Wars items that are in there. But Mickey Mouse Clubhouse is a really good example of
yeah,
like Mickey Mouse. That show's been on for like 15 years now. But Mickey Mouse was a character where kids were introduced to him through their clothes as kids or
right,
baby toys, but like there really wasn't anything Mickey Mouse specifically for the preschool market prior to that, unless you were just obviously there was nothing like unchild friendly about a lot of the classic shorts. And so now they've seen Mickey Mouse's popularity. There are 15-year-olds who, were babies when Mickey Mouse
right.
Clubhouse started, who, are diehard Disney fans. And he's the corporate mascot. So like in many ways, Mickey Mouse Clubhouse not only weans you on to Mickey Mouse and his friends, but it weans you on to Disney at large. So yeah, I think this is like exactly what the Star Wars as a brand would have needed in order to kind of get kids to be Star Wars lifers before they're really
Yeah.
conscious of it. I mean, there's a lot to mine there, but yeah, that's that's it.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Clone Wars trending because I was thinking recently about how like a lot of fans of the age, like let's say between like ages 20 and 30 right now, grew up on the Clone Wars, which started in 2008. So like that was their Star Wars growing
Yep.
up. Um,
Well, and like
and
we experienced it at, the past two celebrations, we're both
yeah,
of an age where, we were teenagers ish when the prequels came
yeah,
out, and we loved them and we hated them at the same time and loved to hate them. And then, at these past two celebrations, it's been like
right,
Hayden Christensen's redemption arc where I
yeah,
think he even cried at this one,
yeah,
in a moment where fans were just giving him such an outpouring of love, and he had put up with such, you know, garbage from fans for so long who blamed him even though he didn't write it. He acted it. Whether
yeah,
you liked his acting or not is your choice, but he didn't create the story. And so like people really gave him a lot of hell for it. So it's been fun, and it's been funny to see that I grew up as a child who knew of Ewoks, so they're my favorite Star Wars,
Yeah.
cute and cuddly. But there's a generation who despised Ewoks and thought they ruined Return of the Jedi. And
Yeah. Well, the thing that's interesting about Young Jedi Adventures specifically is, yeah, I think when Return of the Jedi came out, and maybe for a decade or two after, adult fans kind of looked down on the Ewoks. But with Nubs, who's kind of the Ewok of Young Jedi Adventures, I do see a lot of adult fans embracing him. Like, I bought the plush as soon as I saw him. I haven't seen anybody hating on Nubs. Have you?
No, if anything, I saw like when the products were first revealed, there's a Loungefly mini backpack,
Yeah.
which like those aren't not for kids, but they're also for adults. And it was like our Twitter account when we posted the image of the Nubs Loungefly backpack was so many people being like, I need this. I need
Yes.
this blue Ewok. I have nothing to relate to him other than he's an adorable blue Ewok, and I love that. And it was so funny to see. But I've always been an Ewok kid. Like, Ewoks were the thing. When my older brother was begging me to sit down and watch Star Wars with him, the Ewoks were the thing he was luring over my head, because I had so many teddy bears, and he was like, come on, it's a space teddy bear. And I'd be like, but I've got to sit through Jabba the Hutt to get there. I'm not doing that. He's terrifying.
Yeah. And now we've got a whole show where I mean, I guess we had the Ewok cartoon in the mid 80s, and
but it's bad
made for TV movies.
I didn't grow up with it. Like, I didn't have
Right.
access to that. I guess that's another, with stuff being pulled off Disney Plus, Ewoks wasn't beloved in
Right.
its run, and so it wasn't readily available.
Yeah.
I think they put out like a VHS tape in the late 90s of like
Yeah.
4 episodes that they thought were great, but until it was on Disney Plus, we
Yeah.
didn't have access to it. And now that we do have it, I'm like, oh, this is bad.
Yeah. I think that's one
I've tried
thing.
to watch it a couple
Me
times.
too. I've seen some of the episodes of both of the the droids and the Ewoks cartoons, and I think one thing we can definitely say about Young Jedi Adventures is, as a kid, as far as kids shows go, this is head and shoulders above any of that stuff. Anything else that you would like to say about the stuff that's already out? Because we've got 7 full-length episodes on Disney Plus. There's also the 6 shorts, and then from what I've seen in the research that I've done, I think there's another 18 episodes that have been made already that are due to come out at some point. But based on what we've seen already, did you have anything else you wanted to say about Young Jedi Adventures?
No, just, I'm sure there are some parents of younglings listening to this who probably have seen those 7 episodes a lot over and over, and are ready for the next batches. So I think the release strategy with this one, Disney Junior, typically it's like 30 episode seasons that they greenlight.
Right.
And so you're right, it is like a simultaneously release. So like once Disney Junior catches up on these 7 episodes, probably going one weekly, they'll do another batch on Disney Plus that times out with like the 8th episode on Disney Junior. That'll also be like 7 to 8 episodes. That's the way they've done it with like Puppy Dog Pals. It's the way they're doing it with Spidey and His Amazing Friends. So for you parents, good news. There's new episodes coming, so you can watch 7 or 8 new episodes instead of the same 7 over and over again. I know a lot of my friends who have toddlers are waiting for the new Bluey episodes to come over from Australia, because they've seen all the Blueys so many times that they can quote them, and they know the script, like they're off book. So
okay. Well, I know that at Star Wars Celebration this year in London, they announced at the Disney Parks panel that during one of these upcoming episodes of Young Jedi Adventures, they will be visiting the planet of Batuu, which is the planet that was created for Star Wars Galaxy's Edge at Disney Parks. So very, very much looking forward to that. Is there anything that you would like to see in these upcoming episodes?
In the Batuu one specifically, because I love like the Dr. Aphra character. I love the concept of like archaeology within Star Wars, like bringing Indiana Jones into this universe of like, oh, this is culturally and historically important to us as a growing society of planets. So yeah, I want to learn more about like the origins of Batuu. What are these caves that were being excavated when the rebels came and found they could use it as a base? Like, I want to see that. Give me that.
That's interesting. I would like to get some history of of Batuu while they're visiting there. I wanted to quickly address another comment that we got a question. Is Nubs from the Care Bear planet, which I thought is very funny. So Nubs is not actually an Ewok. We should clarify that. His species is called Pooba, Pooba. Kind of reminds me of Pooh Bear a little bit. So
Pooba, Nubs the
yeah.
Pooba.
And there you've got an actual Ewok. So that's going to wrap up our
no,
discussion.
no symbol on the belly. No,
Right.
no
Yeah.
powerful. Like
Care Bear stare.
we can cure your hatred with just one shared stare.
That's a movie I would like to revisit. The Care Bears movie, which I saw in the theater as a kid. Have not
Oh
seen it
wow!
since, but I remember it being terrifying in the way that 80s kids movies are
All things.
mostly
If
uniformly
you were a
terrifying.
kid in the 80s, you ought to know the world is scary, and we're gonna tell you that so that when the man offers you a Care Bear out of his van, you don't get in it.
Right.
That is a bad man.
Bad choice. All right, that's going to bring us to the end of our discussion of Star Wars Young Jedi Adventures. You can go and watch the first 7 full-length episodes on Disney Plus right now, plus those 6 shorts. That brings us to our final segment here on Who's the Bossk. It's called First Steps into a Larger World. This is where we talk about the media that we've been consuming and or enjoying outside of Star Wars. My example this week is actually from the world of music. One of my favorite musical artists, Ben Folds, who he was popular. He had that band Ben Folds 5 when I was a teenager. That's when I got into him, and I've been following him ever since. And he put out a new album last week called What Matters Most. I've been listening to it in the car. It's really, really good. Like it a lot. Hopefully I will see him on this current tour when he comes through LA. So that's my recommendation for this week. Alex, what have you been listening to, watching, reading, anything like that lately?
Yeah, a lot. Like it for personal, I had always been I'd been wanting to get into it for a couple years now. It's a HBO show called The Other Two. Molly Shannon plays Mom. Have you watched it?
We've seen the first 2 seasons. I haven't seen the new one yet, but I love that show.
Season 3 is going on now, and I was in New York in the fall, and I remember walking past a theater, and the marquee was for a show called 8 Gay Men with AIDS, which is
right.
What the heck? And so I found out that it was a fake show. Obviously,
right.
It did not open, for The Other Two, and so I was like, "Oh, I've got to get into it." And the new season started, so I was thankfully Benji started it with me. I did not expect it to be his kind of a show. It's an us show, so like we're waiting because the next episode deals with it. It's a very meta show. The next episode pokes fun at Strange World for having the first out gay Disney character, and what a big the boy on the show, the son, he gets cast as the voice of the first openly gay character in a Disney movie, but it's like such a non-event thing, like just like one line of dialogue said and then never mentioned again.
This is what Red Letter Media, that YouTube channel.
Yes,
they call this phenomenon passive progressive, where you'll have a gay character, but they'll just like be in the background or something. Yeah. Anyway, continue.
So this he gets cast. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this new episode. Hopefully we get to watch it soon. That's my TV thing. I love the Smart List podcast. I don't know if you've listened to that one.
No, I have not.
So it's Jason Bateman and Will Arnett from Arrested Development, and then Sean Hayes from Will and Grace.
Oh, I have listened to this. I forgot the name of it. Yes.
Yeah, it's their doofy podcast where they basically invite a celebrity friend on. The other two don't know who the guest is, so they're surprised in the moment, and they interview them, and they're just funny. They did a tour last winter, and HBO followed them around with a documentary crew. So I guess pseudo TV, but also podcast. But I just watched that documentary show on Max. Both the things are on Max that I'm plugging. Right. So yeah, that's it. Those are the two things that, like, for fun, I've tuned into lately.
It's actually really ironic that you mentioned The Other Two and then a Jason Bateman project, because during watching the entire first season or so of The Other Two, I was convinced that the lead actor was related to Jason Bateman in some way, because
he does have a Bateman quality.
He looks like Jason Bateman. He has the Bateman like mannerisms and voice pattern, but then I looked it up and he's not a Bateman, which was like shock to me. But yeah, I really like that show, and I got to listen to more of the podcast as well. that's going to bring us to the end of this week's episode of Who's the Bossk. I really want to thank my guest, Alex Reif. Alex, thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy week to chat with me about Star Wars. Where can people find you if you want them to find you?
I can be found at Laughing Place.
Laughing
the only place. It's the only place I write for. So
laughingplace.com for all your Disney news and opinions. Oh, I also want to thank Jamal Avery Jr., who I recorded that interview with a few weeks ago. And, it's always awesome to speak with somebody who gets to be an actor in the Star Wars universe. So thank you for him and for the PR team who helped make that happen. My name is Mike Celestino. Next week on Who's the Bossk, I'm going down. Well, actually, this week I'm going down to Walt Disney World for an Indiana Jones event. And next week on the show, we're going to talk about that. So, like I said, Indiana Jones content coming up on Who's the Bossk. Please tune in for that. I also want to mention that I'm on Instagram now. I started up the first Who's the Bossk Instagram.
You're on the gram
account. Yeah. So have I not added you on there? I got to add you.
I think you did, actually. I think I just forgot. But yes.
Okay. So yeah, I couldn't take Twitter anymore. It was too much negativity and it was just making my stomach hurt. So Instagram is more my speed these days. It's just sharing happy photos and stuff. So that's where you can find me now on social media. I am also still posting to the Who's the Bossk Twitter feed whenever a new episode goes up. So you can still follow me over there at Who's the Bossk Pod. That's the handle on both Instagram and Twitter. And like I said earlier, please visit laughingplace.com for all your Disney news and opinions. My name is Mike Celestino. Thanks so much. See you next time. Bye. Let's do the end.
The smart list. Bye.
I always forget to play the end screen, so I'm going to do it this time. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Bye.